Right, we're going to have a bit of a debate here. Who are the most likely to challenge Manchester City, Spurs, Liverpool, or Arsenal? Now, have a look at this. So, in terms of expected goals and goals scored and conceded, we've got those 4 contenders right now. And if you're a Man United fan or a Chelsea fan, don't get too angry. You're currently in mid-table. And also, maybe if you're a Brighton fan, you can get a bit annoyed. Anyway, in terms of expected goals and goals conceded, I think what's really interesting here is, of course, Man City looking really, really strong. They are exceeding their expected goals, which is 14.1. They've scored 17 goals. They've only conceded 5, and their expected goals against is 5.1. So what that says to me is that they're controlling games, and also they have some quality that allows them to exceed their XG when it comes to scoring goals. Next up, Spurs, which I think is... I'm going to put a different slant on it, and Harry, as an Arsenal fan, I presume, will back me up, as will Kweku as a Chelsea fan, because they've got 17 goals as well, which is fantastic. Their expected goals so far is 13.1, so they're really running a lot hotter. And when it comes to expected goals against, their expected goals against is 10. So it feels like they're getting a little bit lucky as well, because they've got 8 goals conceded so far. Liverpool, I think it's a bit harder to pick apart theirs with the sendings off that they've had so far this season, but they are creating a lot of chances and scoring them as well. But I think the 10 men or 9 men, depending on which game it was, has affected it a little bit. And then Arsenal, and I'll come to you here, Harry, on this one. Controlling games pretty well. Expected goals far less than Spurs, for example. 6.1 expected goals against, only 6 conceded. So they're bang on there in terms of their good luck or bad luck when it comes to goals conceded. But goals for 15 so far from an expected goals of 14.5. So an inability maybe to be it run hot, or more importantly, maybe a talking point that there's been quite recently, Nketiah or whoever that striker may be, is that the difference, the big difference when it comes to Man City and the closest contenders? So let's start off with Man City, actually, and we'll get to that Arsenal point. How are we feeling about Man City? I think they're obviously incredibly competent. They are treble winners. Do you see them having as good a season this year? Do you feel like they've regressed as a squad in any way? Are they fallible in any way, Kweku? Is there anything we can point at?
Yeah, I think they are fallible. I think they are fallible. Before the season, I think everybody had pegged Man City to win the league. That might change. I think Man City it looks like a bit of a transitional season. It's obviously very easy to point to Erling Haaland. We've seen him miss a lot of big chances this season. But there's just something that just doesn't feel right. It feels like they are trying to figure things out on the fly, and they're the best team we've ever seen at figuring stuff out on the fly. But I think you can get at them. I think you can get at them in terms of contenders. And so these teams that we're going through right now, barring maybe Spurs, in my opinion, have a good chance of pushing Man City all the way this season.
There's probably never a better time to a point, although it sounds bizarre, to make big changes than when you are on top, because otherwise, hopefully, I'm sure Pep's thinking this, you're ahead of the curve in terms of that. But with that in mind, for the contenders, there's generally a feeling that you've kind of got to get to 90 points to win the league this year. Do you see Man City getting the same amount of points that they have? Because I think defensively, I don't think they've ever been stronger. It's more offensively that at times it feels a touch clunky, and of course they're missing De Bruyne in a big way. Do you see them getting the same points total as they have in previous seasons?
Yeah, I do, because even though they're conceding around about the amount of goals that they should concede, they're outperforming in the sort of XG category, which I always expect Manchester City to do.
Yeah,
I fell into the trap so many times last season of thinking maybe they're not that great. Maybe there is a chink in their armour. Maybe they will drop points here. And they just find a way constantly to do it. And you're right about the change. There is change in the way that they play. They're more adaptable now, in my opinion. And Pep Guardiola, the reason for me he's the best manager in world football is because he can constantly adapt and change things. And he's always springing surprises. And I think that's really, really important. I don't think any of these sides necessarily get on top of them. I know the debate is who's the most likely, and we'll get into that in a minute, but I think Manchester City are right to be favourites, and I think people are right to say that them failing to win the Premier League would be a surprise, basically.
Yeah, I did a video this week talking about how Wolves beat Man City and how they did it. And the point I was trying to get across, that it was not like, follow this list and you'll be fine against Man City. It was this idea of understanding that football is a game where anything can happen and things can all come together and things can crumble pretty quickly as well. And I think there is a general understanding that Man City are the best. But if things come together, who knows what can happen, because we've seen that time and time again. which leads me on to these three contenders. Out of Spurs, Liverpool and Arsenal, I'm going to go to Spurs straight away because I feel like when it comes to Spurs, do we feel like this is all just a bit of fun right now? Because, I mean, it's a small data set, but there is an element of running hot right now. They're being given goals that aren't conceded because, they've had a little bit of the rub at the green.
Like 12 minutes added on, 14 minutes added on to score a couple of goals. Yeah. I don't want to discredit. And we came on here actually when they appointed Big Andrew and we were like, that's a great appointment. He fits Spurs for where they're at right now. Title challengers, they are
too
not.
Much?
They are not. We are going to establish that right now. Spurs are not title challengers, but they are definitely going to be in contention for finishing in the top four. They should be at this point in terms of how they started the season. But I don't expect Spurs to carry this on. Manor Solomon's injured. They haven't got that strength in depth. Heung-min Son has had a great start to the season. I'm looking at him. I'm like, physically, you're not the same player. You're scoring goals. You may be a little bit more intelligent, but you're not the same Heung-min Son who can stretch opposition defenses. You're way more effective down the middle and then maybe playing as an auxiliary winger. It remains to be seen about their other players. I love James Maddison and I love the players they've got in
European
midfield.
football.
No European football, and the last time that Chelsea didn't have European football, they won the Premier League. But Spurs are not Chelsea. Spurs have not got that DNA, and I don't think that, despite the fact they've had a really strong start to the season, I just don't think they're title challengers.
He's gone for the DNA point.
I know.
He's gone for the DNA point.
Leicester City didn't have DNA, did they? Very, very quickly on Spurs, where do we need to be, and what does the scenario need to be for you to decide that they are now title contenders? What month are we in, and where are they in the league?
May and first.
It's the end of May.
Yeah, fair enough.
In all honesty, if we get to Christmas, I know it's an easy marker to point out, but if we get to Christmas and Spurs are there or thereabouts,
we can have another chat about it.
We can have another chat because the other teams are going to still be in Europe and it's going to be difficult for them.
Right. Liverpool and Arsenal. Liverpool have had a very difficult start to the season in terms of the games that they've played and what they've had to deal with in those games. An unbelievable victory against Newcastle. They've got Brighton this week. They've played Spurs with 9 men. All sorts going on. The thing that I always said with them is that I think they have enough answers from an attacking point of view to keep scoring goals. So for me, the debate, I think we're going to get onto Arsenal, and I think they've got a chance for sure. I think Liverpool, come Christmas, we could be talking about them in an idea that they are incredibly frightening. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think people believe in that yet. But with the games that they've had and the run of games that they have to come, with the depth that they've got as well and the goal scoring ability they have, I think they're up there with Arsenal for me.
They are.
I don't think they're as complete, but I think they're more effective going forward.
They are more effective going forward. There's no doubt about that. And if I'm looking at it just purely from the eye test perspective, I would say loads of goals, loads of attacking prowess going forward, but defensively, there are questions that you need to ask of them. And when you look at their expected goals, assists, 9.2, they've conceded 7 goals, shows you that they probably should have conceded slightly more than they have. And those margins can be the difference.
I think game state's been a big part of that, but Alisson's also there.
Yeah, exactly. They've got one of the best keeper. They've got the best keeper in the world in goal, and so that will
importantly
affect
in goal.
So that will affect the goals against or expected goals against. What I will say about Liverpool is that with them in terms of mounting a title challenge, I think they just need to be within touching distance of City come January or February. Whereas with Arsenal, I think Arsenal need to be ahead of Man City because Liverpool have shown that they can go and do this. Klopp has shown they can go and do this. I know they've lost a lot of players, but Mo Salah's been there in the title race in Man City. So is Van Dijk, so is Trent Alexander-Arnold, so is Andy Robertson. They know that they can go toe-to-toe City and reel off 10 games in a row. Whereas if Arsenal or the other teams in this, they have to be ahead of City and hope the City don't catch them up.
Do you think Arsenal have more pressure on them to be title contenders now than Liverpool do?
Yeah, because of how.
Do you think that's going to hurt them?
Went last season? Yeah, I do. I do, because I think the big question going into the season for Arsenal was, can you maintain the level that you showed last season, which wasn't easy to do because Arsenal were brilliant for 2/3 of the season. And then can you balance that with European football and the level of expectation that now comes, plus this demand on Arsenal now to compete on multiple fronts with the domestic cups as well? It's a lot. It's a big step up for Arsenal in terms of the expectation and all those other things I've mentioned. For Liverpool, it was a really disappointing season last season. And anything now where they're even remotely close to Manchester City will be seen as progress. And so the pressure isn't there. There's no question about that. Just quickly, though, on the goals conceded thing, I know you guys said it was about the game state and in a lot of circumstances, and I agree with that. But if you look at their defence player by player, I don't look at that as a defence that's capable of keeping enough clean sheets and keeping the ball out of the net often enough for them to make that jump from title contenders to title winners. You know, you look at Arsenal's defence, you look at Saliba, Gabriel, let's say Ben White and Zinchenko. When they're all fit, that looks like a pretty good unit with a good goalkeeper behind them. I look at Liverpool's now. Van Dijk, is he at the level that he was? I don't think he is anymore. Trent as a defender, there are question marks. Robertson, I think he's had a bit of a renaissance recently, but is he still at the levels that he was? And who plays as the other centre-back? Is it Matip, who I'm not totally convinced by? Gomez? Konate as well. I'm still not totally convinced about him. So I think in terms of their squad roster, if you like, I still think that's a gaping hole in Liverpool at the moment.
It's interesting though, Liverpool, because if you look at that unit, the players you mentioned, they've been together the longest. They've been together for 4 or 5 years, and the fact that there's still question marks over how their ability to keep out goals is a big issue for them. I think the Arsenal-Liverpool comparison is a great one, because I look at Liverpool, the team that won the league in 1920. Everyone thinks rock and roll football. It wasn't. It was just they were very, very difficult to beat. And the season before that, when they won the Champions League, that was when they were playing the high intensity, that rock and roll football up and down. But when they won the league in 1920, they were just very, very difficult to beat, and they knew how to win games. That's what I see when I look at Arsenal this season. I know the London game has probably put some Arsenal fans off, but when I look at them, they're winning in different ways. They're either going to Bournemouth and absolutely slapping them, or they're going away at Everton and getting that win that they wouldn't have got last season, or they're mitigating the Timber injury in their first game of the season. They're finding ways. Against Spurs, thoroughly outplayed. Managed to get a draw in that game and not lose it. Arsenal just finding ways to get points that they hadn't done previously. I'm not ready to switch my pick, but I'm watching Arsenal very, very closely.
Those Liverpool players, you're right, they've been together a long time. A lot of them have been there, done it, know how to do it, got the t-shirt, all of that stuff. But I think we're on the cusp of seeing what happened to their midfield happen to their defence, in that it's just coming to the end of its lifeline. And Jurgen Klopp's had to, breathe life into that midfield, bring new players in this summer to get them back to that level in that area of the pitch. And I think the next port of call now is refreshing the defence. I know you can't do all of them every summer, but I just feel like that is going to let them down in terms of a title challenge. They'll still be second or third. They're still a wonderful team, and they could win the European Europa League. But in terms of a Premier League title challenge, I think that's where they're going to fall slightly short.